Hi, Crystal, can you hear us?
But it needs to have like from your region.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right, I'm gonna
All right.
keep us muted. We're waiting for Director Heckles, but just wanted to test the audio. So thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Can folks online hear us?
Yes.
Great, thank you. We're about to get started.
Okay, sorry. Well, welcome to the February 4th episode of the Lead-Based Paint Remediation Certification Committee. My name is Matt Heckles. I'm the chair of the committee. And so let's start with just making sure that we have a quorum and bring the meeting to order and sort of take attendance. And then I have one quick thing to sort of address before we go into the full agenda.
Okay, so I will call roll. Director Heckles.
Here.
Okay, Representative Harris.
Here.
Crystal Mincer.
Here.
Sandy Spiegel.
Not here, but I am standing in replacement Hilltopper.
Okay, thank you. Richard.
Here.
Christopher.
Here.
Andre Green is absent. He let us know ahead of time he was not able to make it. Deidre Shepherd. Absent. Franshawn Dickinson.
Present.
And Senator Pinckney. absent. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10 members present. We do have a quorum.
That is good enough. All right. So, so welcome to Middletown. For those of you that are here for the first time, it is a DSHA office sort of annex to our primary offices in Dover, and we have some offices in the Carvel building where we mostly run our single family mortgage assistance programs. We've had this up and running, I think, for a couple of years. It is a nice space to have meetings like this. It isn't too busy. Sometimes we have some meetings here just to give our, senior leadership team the chance to kind of relax and talk about the big picture issues because it isn't too busy. And it's centrally located, which is nice too. So a little less of a drive for those of you from Wilmington. Maybe a little more of a drive for those of you from Dover, if that's your alternative. But generally, the tech here works pretty well. Last time we had a meeting in this office of the Lead-Based Paint Remediation Certification Committee, there was a tech issue at the end of the meeting. And so what happened sequentially was that we ended, for the most part, the business of the committee, except for public comment. We had one public comment from in the room that was made, and then we turned it on to over to public comment from folks who were attending remotely. Amy Rowe was the first person to make comment from the remote setting, and we heard about 15 or so seconds of her public comment, and then our tech started to fritz out. That is the technical term, I think, for what happened. We could not hear what Amy was saying. And so from our perspective, her connection kind of went dark. We asked her to start over or to reboot or to leave and come back in, but she couldn't hear us. So apparently what happened is that the tech issue was probably more likely on our side, though we didn't know that. So once we couldn't communicate with Amy, we asked if there was any other public comment from the remote participants, which they probably couldn't hear us ask that. But again, we didn't know that at the time. And so hearing none, we adjourned the meeting. So first of all, I wanted to apologize to Amy for the fact that we did not hear her comments. I did speak to her after the meeting and explained what happened from our perspective. Amy has reached out to the Department of Justice and asked for FOIA review. And we've talked about that too, because I think her question is actually, I think we understand each other about what happened, that we weren't trying to silence public comment at all, but it is a good question about what a committee ought to do in that situation, given that we are more and more in hybrid meeting modes. And so I don't know if we will get that kind of guidance from DOJ or if we should seek it more broadly from some other state entity that may be involved in that kind of guidance. But it is a good question about, I don't think that there is guidance. We handled the situation, I think, the best as we could. But who knows, if that had happened earlier in our meeting, and we were just sitting here talking like this and nobody could hear us online and nobody could reach us, I'm not sure that we would know that the remote side of the meeting was not working, right? So it is a kind of a good question. We were also lucky in that the recording of the meeting did capture the entirety, the whole way up until the very last words that Amy said, which were, and now I conclude my comments, were captured by the video. I read the transcription of them. They're certainly available to all of the members of the committee in that video or transcribed form, so that you can see what Amy said during her public comment. I also gave Amy the opportunity to address the committee and restate those comments at the beginning of this meeting, so to make sure that we got them in. She doesn't feel like that's necessary. I can open that opportunity up again to you, Amy, if you've changed your mind on that. or anyone else who, quite frankly, may have been looking to make comment at the end of our last meeting. I thought that we could just take a moment and sort of go off the agenda and make sure that anybody that wanted to make comments at the end of the last meeting has the opportunity to do that now, either in the room or online. And so if you're online and you would like to make comments based on sort of the last meeting, just raise your hand and we'll let that happen now. Otherwise, I don't know how else we can make sure that we have done everything that we can to get public comment. And we'll sort of have to at this point move on, hoping again to get some sort of guidance about how to handle that situation if we run into it again in the future, and hoping that we don't.
Okay, we do have a hand up from Matt Jones. So Matt, I'm going to allow your mic. Matt, you should be able to unmute at this point.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
I'm not sure when the last meeting was. I thought I attended the last meeting and made a comment, and it sounded like people heard me, so maybe I missed a meeting. When was
Matt, if I
the
can
last
answer that
meeting?
question, it was January 7th was the last meeting date.
Okay, I must have missed that one. I'm sorry. I did submit written comments and a verbal comment at the last meeting I attended, which I guess was back in December. Thank you.
And actually, thank you for the reminder. We also have the ability for the public to make comment on our website, between meetings, before or after, between meetings, anything else. And that is entered into the record for this committee's work.
Also real quick, I'm letting in Deidre. So she has now joined. All right.
And is there a comment in the chat?
Normally the chat is disabled because it's very hard for me to do all of the things. I'm trying to bring it up now and it's.
Okay. So I know that the committee members have access to the recording. Is that publicly posted as well?
Yes, the entire recording is on our website.
Okay. Maybe just, if you don't mind, add a text response
Yes,
there.
okay.
Any other concerns or questions about tech issues and our attempt to resolve them? Okay. Let's move on then. So the first thing that we have to do is approve the minutes from that January 7th meeting. All of that last conversation notwithstanding, the minutes do reflect a brief note about that issue and at the very end, but otherwise, does anybody have any questions or concerns? Edits to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve them.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay. Any further discussion or comments? All in favor of approving the minutes from the January 7th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have minutes. Thank you. All right, so we are moving towards the hurtling perhaps towards the sort of the deadline for us to file a first report as required by the legislation. As we discussed at the last meeting, I would very much like for us to file that report, even if it is incomplete, even if there are questions that we can't answer. I think it's important for us to file that report without requesting an extension, so that the legislature knows, where we are in our process and what questions remain and where we are planning to go from there. So in order to do that, Caitlin was kind enough, I suppose, to put together a list, sort of at the start of a document that would sort of become, along with some additional narrative, sort of the way that we intend to respond to the specific questions that are asked this committee to respond to in the legislation. Again, I don't expect that our report will be a comprehensive analysis of everything that we've been asked to do. We have, along the way of our conversations here, discussed challenges with certain data or other parts, but I think, again, it's important for us to give the information that we have so far sort of identified. So this is our draft version of that. What we would hope to have happen is that at our next meeting on the 25th, we could approve a final version of this. So this meeting would be spent discussing these draft points and getting initial sort of approval from this committee that the answers to these questions are on the right track. We would go back, polish it up, add some narrative about the process of this committee, the work that it's done, when we've met, the public, all of the things that we would want to have in sort of the introduction area of the report, and also suggest that this is very much sort of a work in progress in terms of implementation of the law. That sound okay?
Yes. Yeah, but question, so,
Yes.
just because I have to be the one to deal with it, is the suggestion that this is not the final report, it's an interim report, so you'd still be asking for an extension of some sort to finalize the.
So the way that we read the legislation is that
Yeah.
this committee doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
That it continues to exist and it continues to monitor, progress towards implementation of the law and can make reports, and can continue sort of its work beyond this initial fund. To me, it is an interim report. I don't recall what the legislation calls it, if it calls it a final report, but even if it does call it a final report, the legislation asks this committee to continue to exist beyond that. So I think that we'd probably change our cadence, perhaps, maybe not meet twice a month as we have been, and think about this as sort of, the committee that is going to continue to sort of march along and look at the way that the industry is looking to implement this, identify barriers and try to work through them, and beyond obviously this report being implemented or being submitted.
I will voice that I have some concerns with that, because part of the reason for the feasibility study was to figure out where we're going with the legislation. And so I guess will be determined by how these conversations go, but from what I feel we've already uncovered is like there's some discrepancies around, should we have inspectors or assessors and things like that, and having clarity around where we're going with that. So we can update legislation with the expectations on what is going to happen with providers, et cetera, and then the impacted community. So
Sure.
I'll wait to say it.
Okay. Let's, I think as we work through this, some of those
Okay.
questions I think are answered and some we have real concerns. I think what I'm struggling with is where we know we're not going to have an answer.
Yeah. Well, I just want to flag in the legislation, they said at minimum answer those, but the real question is there something that is not asked here
Yeah.
that is important to
That's,
be considered for legislative process?
That'll be the last question as we get through here is what else should this report contain?
Okay.
And we'll go from there. Okay. Let's try to get through these 16. Some people say 14 representative, but we counted. And again, you'll see that there are some that we don't have answers to. So whether we file this report or not, I think is the final question we'll ask today. But again, okay, let's get through. Caitlin, are you capable of walking us through this as you manage everything else, or
You mean like scrolling?
yeah, and kind of managing our us through this process, or
Yeah.
yeah, okay, well, we do that then, please.
So as you stated, I took all of the questions from the legislation, and separated them out. So even though in the bill, it looks like there are 11, I counted 16. So we've started filling in where we do have information. Figure out which mouse I'm using. All right, guys. There we go. So you can see we started populating information, but there are some places where we have placeholders. So like number 5, how does the state incentivize and train additional inspectors and certified contractors? We've started filling in information about the standards for lead inspection. But we haven't really answered a lot of the later questions, predicted demand for loans or grants. If not the department, what agency should enforce this? And then the other day, Richard sent some additional questions with answers. So that is captured at the bottom here. So this stuff under this dark line is new information that's been sent to the committee.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the top. I think it's important for us to go sort of through them one by one and, get input from the committee on the information that's already included and what else might be needed.
Well, so for number 1, we said this answer will depend on the answers to the other questions.
Any other problem with that answer? Fair enough. Can we
It's just like, okay.
I'm sorry, can we just be reminded what the implementation deadlines are?
All right, the way the bill spells this out is very confusing. My understanding is that it may be helpful to actually look at the bill, which I can pull up. Because it's like one thing is contingent upon another thing, and it's let me try to find it. I believe this deadline to be March 1st, 2032. Does that line up with your interpretation?
So, so the committee begins immediately. Full enforcement starts March 1st, 2027. So meaning folks would have to work through the process should changes not come from the feasibility committee saying, hey, these deadlines. Part of the reason why I'm kind of stuck on saying, are we sure we're done with this feasibility study? Because the agreement was when we passed this, that there are a lot of strong deadlines in here for a reason. But some folks had concerns, were we prepared as a state to actually meet that space? And so 2027 is when property owners will be expected to file with the state, participate in the remediation, et cetera, unless something comes out of this feasibility study that says those are unrealistic timelines to start.
Okay.
Is that
So-
28,
Yeah.
2028?
Right, so let's look here. So it says, starting after the implementation date under paragraph 2 of section 5 of this act, a small property owner must obtain certification. It must be obtained and filed prior to the commencement of a rental agreement, but no more than 4 years after the implementation date of paragraph 2 of section 5. So if we go to that section, and this is where it gets confusing, section 5, number 2 says, all right, section 5402 through 5409, 5411, et cetera, must be implemented the earlier of the following. So the earlier of 12 months following the date of publication in the Register of Regulations by the Director of DSHA, saying that all necessary legislation and appropriations have been made to enforce and that final regulations have been promulgated, or March 1st, the earlier of those two. So if we assume that,
2028.
right, so if we assume that March 1st, 2028 will be sooner than when Director Heckles can do all of those other things, then it would be within 4 years of that date that the landlords, whether small or large, would have to have that lead-free or lead-safe. That is my understanding.
I guess you could.
Right, that gets you to March 1st, 2032 would be like the latest that those landlords, whether small or large, would have to. They could do it earlier, right?
Where is this that you're reading? Which, you just have page number, not line number?
I'm looking at the enrolled bill, so it doesn't have line numbers, but
No.
I'm looking at page 9 of 10.
Section, sorry.
So it's section 5 of the bill says this act is effective immediately and is to be implemented as follows. If you look at subsection 2, that's where it says those specific sections talking about the requirements for the landlords. Those provisions are implemented the earlier of those two scenarios, when Director Heckles can do all those things, or March 1st, 2028.
You're talking about lines 37 through.
It's the very last part of the
Yeah,
bill.
very, sorry, yeah, just go to the
Yeah.
very last page there.
Yeah, so it's like, the earlier section says within 4 years of the implementation date. Well, the implementation date essentially is the earlier of March 1st, 2028, or once Director Heckle.
Or 12 months after I,
Yeah.
Right.
So my understanding is that the bill, whatever the bill winds up being, the drop dead deadline is March 1st, 2028 to start. That's the latest that we can start, right? And then we have 4 year, then, the market, the landlords have 4 years to implement after that.
Which gets us to 2032.
you want to consult?
I think what the bill is trying to say is that, so that March 1st, 2028 date would be when the initial inspection period would start, but landlords would be required to get an inspection upon the execution of a lease after March 1, 2028. So you'd have to have your inspection prior to that. So if March 2nd, 2028, you're going to sign a lease and you're having an inspection, you're no longer in compliance, whether this committee does anything or not. With that 4-year period, everyone has to get their inspections, whether they start a lease or not. So even if you have an existing tenant, they remain 4 years, you would have to get the inspection. Yeah, I guess the question is, what is the inspection?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I think that's, that, so I think the 4-year period, Caitlin, that you referenced is if you don't have a renewal between after March 1st and before 4 years later, you still have to get your unit certified as lead safe during that period, even if the tenancy does not turn over.
That's my understanding.
Okay, I think that's mine too. Yeah.
Go back to the working doc.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So, okay. Does everyone agree with that timeline? Are we, since there is question about it, it is a little complicated in the bill, but,
That's been some clarity, and I was a little confused too, so.
so I think, so the question there, on one is that, you know, at this time, I don't believe I would certify everything that needs to be certified to trigger a start date prior to March 1 of 28. That could change. But at this point, you know, I think that's what the answer to that first question is. You know, I'm not necessarily, I don't know that we would say that it's automatically March of 28, but that at this point it is not prior to that. Okay. Question 2.
Oh, DJ has her hand up.
So are we saying that the existing deadlines are feasible? Like, is that what you're saying? The existing deadlines are okay for now?
I think it's saying it depends on the information provided.
I think that right.
It will depend on the information gathered to respond to the questions.
We have not, I think we will come to the conclusion as we go through this that we have, we can't say definitively whether that is an appropriate implementation deadline or not, but that work will have to continue. What I want to do.
So, and you think you'll have that conclusion with this, but you're saying that you don't see that you would certify by then, but then that would mean I would imagine that for property owners, that kind of puts them in a weird space for preparation without having clarity if we would look to extend that timeline. So if you think that you couldn't certify by then or wouldn't for whatever reason, I think it's important to say, like, realistically, you know, the reason I know I want it certified, likely want it certified is because X, Y, and Z, and that would take a certain amount of time just for fairness to property owners to be able to prepare for what's next.
So I wanted to go back to our responsibility as a committee. So we do have the responsibility to file this report March 1st of 26. And then it does say after the delivery of its initial report, the committee must issue updated reports on January 1st of each calendar year through January 1st, 2030. So I hope we all like each other. We're going to be together for a while. And then every report issued under this subsection shall, if the committee believes existing deadlines are not feasible, propose specific new deadlines to replace those enumerated, blah, 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 blah. So, so we have this report due March 1st and another due January 1st of 27. What year is this? 27, which would still be more than 12, 15 months out of the implementation date, right? And another legislative session in the meantime. So I don't think that with this committee, I don't feel as though this committee has circled around, you know, firm recommendations about the March 1st deadline. But I do think that that is the work of March through January of 27.
DJ, did you have another?
You're probably there and you feel comfortable with that.
It leaves a lot of uncertainty, I think is the problem. So, I mean, you know, I understand what you're saying but I see the pace that we're going at. It seems as though we should come up with some realistic deadlines, you know, maybe some realistic extensions and some milestones, like what we expect. And then that way, when we hit those time periods, we can say, okay, you know, we have an answer, you know, just say 1 through 4. Do we have good answers 1 through 4? Yes, okay, then we move forward. But if not, let's extend it.
So even like with the inspector assessor thing, if we're going to implement some type of legislation around which we're expecting, and then looking to like our Deltec partners to put in place some type of program to get assessors here, or if we're doing an interstate compact of any kind, we might want to do that over this session, which would then guide our guidance into the following January or like that. So, yeah, so I think kind of we're on the same page. It's like, what are our marching orders, at least for me as a legislator, to say, you know, we can't determine anything unless we have these other things in place and know how far along we've gotten on those things for our temporary.
One of the things that I guess I'm a little concerned about too, like I love the fact that we have this working document. It's perfect because it kind of gives
Yeah.
us some guidance.
Well, then get off question one.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna move this as an example. You know, some of the information is, it's great that it's here, and once it's here in public knowledge, your public record, people are gonna assume that it's accurate. Like I would, if I read this, I'd be like, well, then that makes sense. It's accurate. But I'm looking at number 2, and I know we had a hard time coming up with the number of rental units in the state. And, you know, if you sway 5 or 10,000 either direction, that might not sound like a big number, but it is a big number when it comes to doing inspections. So, you know, based off of this report, it's saying we have roughly 10,000 pre-1978 rental units, if I'm reading this correctly, unless I'm missing
Just that
something
we know of.
that we know of. Right?
Most of the jurisdictions did not get back to us
Or did not have the information.
or just don't collect the information.
Right. And that's, I mean, that's
And I
kind of a
can't-
problem.
Yeah, you can't.
Well, okay, so let's,
So,
so thank you for moving us along to number 2. We'll come back to number 1. Don't worry, don't worry.
well,
Let's just make sure everyone understands what our answer is first. I do very much hope that the members of this committee, especially and members of the public, understand that a working doc is why we're here. I mean, that it's hard for us to have a conversation without having something written down to respond to. That by writing this down, we're not assuming that it is correct and accurate. That's the process that we're supposed to be going through today. Hearing your concerns about how this is presented and where there are gaps in information, how we notate that, how we sort of record the concerns of different members of this committee in our answers. If you don't mind, can we start with, so what does this answer tell us?
So first off, there is no statewide rental registry. There is no requirement in Delaware that if you are renting an apartment that you register with any one entity. We have 60 jurisdictions in the state of Delaware. That includes 3 counties and 57 municipalities. We are aware through research that we've done for another project of at least 34 jurisdictions that have some type of requirement or license or permitting requirement within their own jurisdictions. So Richard, Franchon, and I divided up that list of 34 jurisdictions that we thought, based on the information we have, that may collect this information. And we reached out to them and said, hey, we're charged with coming up with this number. What do you have for us? And the results are, of those 34, let's see, scroll. We were only able to get data from Bridgeville, Camden, Milford, Milton, Newark, and Newcastle County. 19 of the jurisdictions that do have some sort of rental licensure requirement just don't collect the age of the unit.
Mhm.
So they may have a registry, but it doesn't capture how old the building is.
Mhm.
So there is no data available for that. And then there are jurisdictions that don't even collect or require a rental permit. So the answer is unknown. We do not know. We cannot come up with a definitive count. We can only report what we know from the jurisdictions that actually have that data. I'd love to give a better answer, but that's the answer.
That's it.
right. And so, I mean, I think that's one of the challenges that we're up against, is having good data, right? So we want to make informed decisions, because the reality of it is this legislation is going to affect affordability, right? It could affect affordability for tenants. And, you know, I've seen different numbers for rental housing and estimates in the state. You know, this reflects roughly 10,000. The 2024 census, if you look at the 2024 census for Delaware, it's showing closer to 60,000 rentals pre-1978. And I think that's more in line with the real number, and it might even be a little higher than that. And I think that's important, because depending on how we implement this legislation, we have 60,000 rental units to inspect in a very short period of time. And then they have to be done over and over again. So, we've already determined that the workforce is limited to none. The training is limited to none. And 60,000 versus 10,000 rental units is a big discrepancy.
To be clear, this is not saying that there are 10,000, right? This is saying that we don't, I mean, the first line
That
is
we have,
we are
yeah.
unable to determine. These are the areas where we were able to determine, and we feel pretty confident that those units exist and are recorded, acknowledging that there are many more that we have no ability to track.
And so maybe we need to add his point of
Yeah.
what the Census Bureau said. So if you can send that to us,
I think
we
might have-
may be able to add a statement there about this discrepancy versus the 2024 census that has approximately 60,000 rentals pre-1970.
54,690.
So let's add that because that shows the gap in data.
Well, that gives an
And it gives-
estimated statewide number.
Statewide number,
that-
just,
that
yes.
we can't,
And we can't break it down per jurisdiction. We don't have that information.
I don't know if that's even necessary.
Yeah. But
Do that.
yeah, I appreciate the fact that you have it on the census.
does everyone on this or?
Yeah, on this,
Okay.
because that all kind of ties into some of the things that we're up against is, especially in Sussex County, there's a lot of farmhouses and family-owned, like single homes, like ranch property and stuff that are owned inherited by family members, and it's been in generations, some of these old farmhouses, and people have their own houses that they're living in, so they're like, hey, I'm just gonna rent it. And then whoever, no lease agreement, no nothing, it's just they're gonna rent it for cash. They don't care who moves in and rents it. I've called like big cities and they're like, oh, you have to call the county. I call the county and they're like, we have no idea. It's out of our, basically what I'm trying to say is, unless we have a registry, we're never gonna know how many units are out there.
But those
And
places
that-
would even be on a registry if there was one, because they're clearly living outside of.
There's no way to enforce it,
Sure.
and there's no way to even have an idea of how many true number of rental units are out there. Because if
That's
we don't
hard
have
to
a
do.
registry,
Okay, so, but are we okay with adding this source? I mean, again, I don't think that anybody's gonna suggest that any number that we come up with is the exact number.
well, what I wanted to ask is, when we're done with meeting, or even during while we're meeting, do we have an opportunity to suggest or make recommendations to help legislation maybe come up with another mandate or another,
Yeah, that's the,
because without that registry, we're just guessing.
Okay.
And that would be one of the things I would recommend, is that we have a registry.
Deidre has her hand up.
Yes, just to Richard's point, I was, maybe like on question 13, right? And I know we're on question 2, but it asks like what procedures will be put in place for property owners to obtain certification, and a rental registry could very well fit right there. So I think there is a space for us to be able to have a solution for that registry problem or issue.
Okay,
I might just to comment on that as well. I mean, with as far as a rental registry, it sounds great on the surface, right? Everybody registers. But the reality of it is it requires participation.
yeah, I think.
And if you would require a very robust system in order to get everybody registered to participate. They tried it in New Jersey. They spent, I don't know, 30-some million on this registry. Everybody was registered. And then what happened is, because whoever did the database, you had multiple entries for the same property. So each property was counted multiple times. So it's, junky data in, junky data out, basically. So it sounds great, but it's not realistic, I don't think. City of Wilmington has a registry. You're supposed to have a business license. not everybody participates in that program. And I don't think the city of Wilmington generally knows how many rentals they have, even though they have a rental license and they recently increased their rental license to supposedly cover the costs. But you can't get a realistic number out of the city of Wilmington.
I tried.
And city. So a rental registry.
Fair enough.
But
Okay, fair enough. Again, I don't know whether, so that's where I think the work of this committee gets even more complicated, right? Because, we're not just, I mean, making recommendations. Well, anyway, let's get there when we get there. Does anybody have a concern about adding, the census, 54,000 units and some change as a supplemental reference point?
No.
Okay, let's add that to, the.
Yes, we got some.
All right, let's all take 5. Just to bask in the glow. I think we also answered number 3 while we were in that conversation, that we don't have a good breakdown, by county. I don't know whether, I don't think we have to make the point that it doesn't really matter that much. That really I mean, this is a statewide ordinance that would have statewide application, and capacity would need to be, available statewide for whatever it is that requires to implement this. So, I don't think we've been very focused on that question. And I think for those reasons.
I would just like to flag
Yep.
as a Kent County resident. But
is that why you're?
I would just like to flag that often Kent and Sussex don't get the same amount of funding for things. And so and for instance, like Newcastle, you guys have quite a bit of lead funding already. And thankfully the governor is putting funding into lead in his GRB this year. But from his own, he and I chatted and he was like, well, because Newcastle already has funding. Well, what if Newcastle starts to run dry? What if Kent and Sussex use it up, or Newcastle uses some of already what was put in, and so Kent and Sussex get a little less? It helps with targeting to know where we should be hyper focused, and if we are limited in our funds, we might want to say, where do we have the highest concentration of young people, of people who have health issues, to first target that funding in those areas. And so while we might not necessarily want to say, I think that is a start for us to do some hyper targeting, is to know at least what counties have the largest number.
Well, yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
But also not just the counties. When I did it for Newcastle County, I had to have data for at least
Yeah.
another municipality to justify it. So I couldn't get rentals, so I could just pre-1970, I just had to do units like pre-1978. So your point is important to the funding piece. Without that data, it's very hard to support it, to get that, the data to get fundings.
And in our legislation, it right now is saying, there are certain demographics that we're going to prioritize as far as health, most specifically children. Some parts of Delaware just don't have as high a population of kids. And so if we are saying, hey, we're going to start in, I don't know, Odessa, we want to be able to explain our why, and if we're not tracking the data. So I just want to flag that. I know it's easier said than done because we don't really know where the houses are at this moment. But I do want to say from the legislative side, and hearing from different advocates, that is a difficulty, is where do we target? But again, that's a data.
Thank you. So not an important question, just one that's gonna be very difficult, given the fact that we don't have even, great statewide data. All right, so the next question gets into the workforce, thank you. And the difference between, and this is from conversations of this committee, the lead inspectors versus lead risk assessors, and the difference between the work of those two types of certified people. And then it gives numbers on the back side of the page, 17 certified lead inspectors with the state and 65 individuals certified as lead risk assessors. There are firms that are also certified. We went around and around as a reminder about sort of what level of certification ought to be required. And how much of the certifications are actually doing the type of work that would be deployed to inspecting units at tenant turnover, for example, to determine that they are lead safe. And again, we ran into a lot of sort of problems around the information that we have and translating that to how that would be deployed in implementing this law. So other than reporting on the certified election members, again, I think that the determination is that no, we don't have the capacity of certified lead inspectors or risk assessors to implement the law. But I don't know that there's a deeper conclusion that we're hovering around here.
So typically, because we do the certifications for lead inspectors and lead risk assessors, most of the companies that we deal with, the environmental testing firms, they do both. So I think the reason why there's such a difference in numbers between the lead inspectors and lead risk assessors is because there's more of a demand for risk assessors in Delaware. Because when somebody applies, like a daycare center applies for an application, become a daycare center, if it's older than 1978, the building, a lot of times it's a home that they're converting, like the living room is now a daycare center. So they have to get a lead risk assessment done, and that's usually done by a lead risk assessor. So we don't really get many request or a need for inspections, lead inspections. So that's why the numbers are lower, because they're like, well, if it's not in demand, why do I pay all the money for the course, get certified, pay the money for the certification, and then it's just idling, it's not doing anything for me. I get a better return on my investment. I get certified as a lead risk assessor. So that's why there's more of those. And then as far as why the numbers are so low, I think it goes back to demand as well. I mean, we don't have a problem with calling a lead risk assessor or emailing them and asking them to do a job for us and pay them. Because they're always within like a week or two, they'll be out there doing the work. It's all based on people's availability though. But
I wonder if that's a point that you would suggest that we add here, that the department does have a significantly developed process for rapidly certifying both inspectors and assessors.
Rapidly certified, I'm like 10%, but.
You say a week?
well, when we
That's for the work.
there's
That's before the
stuff
work.
that needs to be done before that. You have to take the course and you
Yeah.
have to pass it. Now,
Okay.
fortunately, we don't have any abatement courses in the state of Delaware.
There's no
We're-
base rate.
Okay, right, we talked about that, we talked about that.
Yeah.
We're working on that now through our HUD capacity grant, but they have to go to like Hanover or they have to go to somewhere in New Jersey.
Can I,
And take the course outside of the state. Then they have to take the state exam.
Yep.
And then once they pass the test, then they send in the application. Once we give all that information, we can process that certification like within 48 hours.
Okay,
I think that.
hold on, I think,
I do know.
let's go,
Crystal and
let's go to the
DJ.
videotaping.
did you
Crystal
call on me?
and then
Yeah.
DJ?
I'm sorry. I was gonna ask Richard, can other assessors, inspectors in other surrounding states come into Delaware and get like a temporary certification fairly easily?
They don't need that. They can get a full certification from the state of Delaware. There's a couple of them that are New Jersey based. There's one out of Philly that I have a good rapport with. Actually helped her set up her, she wanted to do LRAs for daycare center, so I helped her through that process. But she's based out of Philly and she got licensed in Delaware. She took the exam, she took the course, took the exam, she got sent in her paperwork and she was processed within a week. So now
Okay,
she can
thank you.
do
That's
the
helpful. So we can
in-state
account that, we can consider that
Yes,
like those folks available to us.
Yeah, as long as they take a EPA recognized course, it could be anywhere in the country. We'll accept that course, that training, but they still have to register in the state of Delaware to do work in the state of Delaware.
They still have to apply to get certified with the state, yes?
Yes.
So there's reciprocity
Yeah.
with their coursework and certification with other states. However, they still have to put in the application with the state to get the state certification.
And do they have to pass our state test?
Yes.
Okay, so they still have to pass the state test. Well, what I was gonna say, I wanted to add on about lead inspection, the numbers, again, he's correct about requirements or about the amount of work. But just like all of the other states, those lead inspection technicians, which is some change of difference in language. In other states, they call it lead safe technicians, right? Lead inspectors / lead safe technicians is the training. There will be a demand if we have to have this for 60,000 units. So that demand, those numbers will increase, I believe, on the lead inspection individuals if when this program is implemented and there's going to be a need. Because most people don't invest it here because we don't have a program such as Philly or New Jersey.
Can I just clarify one thing?
I just want to go in order.
Oh, okay.
Deidre?
Yes, so to answer question 4, like, I'm wondering, like, would it be appropriate to think of maybe like an approximate number of risk assessors or lead safe technicians and contractors that would be necessary to address the possible demand?
Well, that's gonna be hard because if you don't know how many units are out there in the first place, how are we gonna know how many technicians or inspectors or risk assessors we're gonna need?
I guess we could go by the
Well,
approximate
we-
60,000.
Right, right. We have some numbers, right, based on exactly the new information that we received. I think I'm just wondering if that would be appropriate, just to think of some numbers so we can, like, well, we don't have this, but we think based on a demand, we may need this amount of lead safe technicians and these amount of contractors.
I don't know how to do that.
And then the good thing about the way the bill is written, from the way I understand it, it's not like everybody has to go like to starting gate, like a horse race. It's kind of staggered based on the size of the units, how many units there are, and the age of the units. So I think that it's staggered in a way is kind of helpful, but still, we don't know. The bigger units, like Capano and some of those that have lease agreements and they're just obvious apartment complexes are going to be easier to deal with. But like I said before, if there's people renting homes and we aren't even aware of it.
So I did want to clarify, like, so with the lead risk assessors, lead inspectors. So when you guys certify them from the state's perspective, they already have a certification from the EPA. And then your certification that you provide is to do business in the state of Delaware, correct?
The certification they get from the EPA is just for the training.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that they can just work in any state and start doing work. They have to still register within those states they want to work in.
So you're trained, you said you could certify lead risk assessors and lead inspectors, meaning here in the state of Delaware after they get their EPA legislation.
Right. And certification, yeah.
Certification.
So they get their let me make sure cause down, that's what I thought too. So a lead inspector, to get a lead inspector, for what I understand, as he said, you take the EPA class, it's a 1-day class, yes? It's a week, okay,
I think it's 40 hours.
40 hours, I thought it was 24.
It's usually,
Okay,
Whatever.
it's two,
Okay,
2 days.
you get the EPA.
so you get the EPA training, okay? Then I have to submit to the state my application to do, am I required as an inspector to take the test? Just like that, is there a test that I have to take for a lead inspector?
Mhm.
How much is that test?
The test is free.
The test is free, but the application is about what?
250.
Per firm or individual?
The firms are 300 and individual, I think, is 250.
Okay, thank you.
So, and I think that's,
Okay,
but because.
but the question was, how many approved inspectors or certified contractors are there in the state? So, like, I don't know that it matters to me whether it's expensive or hard or how long it takes. I mean, the state has a process for doing this, and our job is to say how many there are currently that have that certification. You know, after that, I think it really, like, it gets, we can go down this rabbit hole as we have in some past meetings over and over again. There's no answer. If you are going to have up to 50,000 inspections per year, I bet someone's going to sit through that 40-hour course.
Yes, I just wanted to see, because I think somewhere we brought up like the cost. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Well,
So I wanted to expand on what I was saying though, because so it goes back to, so we have to come up with some sort of feasibility of what's the feasibility of this law, right? Can we implement it? And part of that is not only knowing how many houses pre-1978, but also the workforce, because the reality of it is you're not going to gear up overnight. It's going to take time. So we need time to make that happen.
Sure.
Currently, there's a short list on your website of the contractors that actually work, right? So I kind of feel like that should be part of this document as well, like the actual contractors that are available, right? So that we can see how many actual workers there are. But there was a lot of conversation in previous meetings about lead inspectors versus lead risk assessors.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about here. And I kind of feel like at some point we drilled down on the fact that the lead risk assessment isn't necessarily the best way to go because it's not really feasible in this application. And one of the questions we're tasked with is to define what a lead inspector is. So we have the EPA's definition of a lead inspector, but that's not necessarily the legislation's definition of what what a lead inspection is going to consist of.
Yeah.
So I just want to.
Because, hold on. Yeah, the question though is how many people are certified? So I think we've answered that question, and I think we should add that the department has a sophisticated process for certifying people. That's to answer this question. You're bringing up other issues that I think we'll get to in inspections, but that is the answer to this question. And you know, again, we're looking at implementation in March of 2028. You know, so if it's a 40-hour course. You know, it is entirely feasible that you could have everyone in the state of Delaware probably certified as a lead inspector in the next 2.5 years if you actually had to. So there's a feasibility. Now, whether that's reasonable or not, I don't know. And that's where I think some of these questions are going to be really hard for us to answer. Feasible? Sure. Probable? I don't know. You know, likely? Maybe not. So, I mean, I want to be really, really careful here. It is feasible that we will have as many inspectors of whatever type because we have a process, we have regulation, and we have time to get there.
But the process for this, what the state has available is to certify people after they have the EPA course. So we don't have an EPA course available in the state of Delaware.
Fair enough.
So, but I just want to make sure that when we answer these questions, though, that it's accurate because what the state is doing is certifying people after they've already had the training.
That's right.
And I also want to just, and I brought this up in another meeting, which is there's a key point. These are questions at a minimum. But as the legislator who ran this, I want people to really remember this part. In addition to any other issues the committee deems relevant to feasibility, and I think there are things to consider, like, do we want to waive a cost for a certain amount of time? Do we want to see if, not put more work on you, but maybe you check other states, and if they have a similar test and they've passed the test in another state, they don't have to retest here, they just have to pay the fee. Whatever we can do to speed up, in this case, the workforce would be helpful. And with all of these questions, they were just meant to generate thought, and then people dig in deeper, based on conversations I would have, often in silos where stakeholders weren't at the same meetings, and I wanted stakeholders from different groups to be at the same conversation to say, well, what about this and what about that, and dig in. And so those would be questions that we would move with. So I don't want to get so stuck on just answering these questions. Yes, those are minimum questions, but the reality is, what makes it so that we can have a lead-free or lead-safe Delaware? And what is required to get us there and keep us there, while also not creating or exacerbating the housing crisis we currently have. Just for clarity about where I was with writing this, so we're all aware of the types of conversations that we were hoping to get out of this.
So we
Can I ask you?
again, we can add, we can add to the
Yeah.
questions, but the way that I'm approaching this is that that's a different question, right? The question that I think we have a responsibility to answer are the ones that you wrote. And
Yes, as I said, those are
potentially,
minimums.
and potentially others, right?
Yes.
But I want to make sure that we're answering the questions, and then adding to the list.
Right.
Right. So, and I think there's maybe a distinction without a difference in what we're trying to accomplish. But again, I think it's important to answer these questions as they're asked, because I want to make sure that we do that.
Right.
Now, if the committee has at the end a suggestion that the work that we continue to do is, how do we streamline certifications? That's a different question.
Right.
That has different answers that the department, I think, can.
I can
continue
understand
work.
that. I think it was just sometimes it's a generative process. And
Yep.
So
So
I want to touch on that.
As the person trying to keep us on the same page, I have a question, and that is, it sounds to me like we maybe want to add to the response to number 4, right? We have the numbers. Director Heckles, you were suggesting maybe we add a note about the department's process for certifying. So my question is, Richard, can you just send me bullets of what the process is?
I would simply say that the department has responsibility for certifying inspectors and risk assessors, and a defined process to do that.
And I just want to add, when people are sending in their applications to become either a lead risk assessor or a lead inspector, it's not usually just anybody, like an individual that's working out of their house. Typically, they're lining up with a firm. And I'm going to use Brightfields as an example because I know Matt Jones is on the conference. But say Brightfields they're a testing environmental firm. And say the demand for lead risk assessors or inspectors are going up because now this new law came out and everybody now needs to have their apartments inspected. So they're going to start hiring people, and then they can negotiate with their employers who's going to pay for who's going to pay for the EPA course. Maybe the Brightfields will pay for it because they're going to be their employer. So it's not coming out of the person's pocket. It's usually probably going to come out of the employer's pocket.
Okay.
I
But
just
listen,
I don't think that's an
I
issue.
appreciate that, but I don't think it's relevant to answering this question.
Yes, because that's what I was
going
gonna say. I don't think it's really relevant to this question, because to me, it's a non-issue.
Okay, so DHSS is responsible for certifications and has a defined process is the addition to the report.
That's all I wanted,
Number 5,
is the.
now, how does the state incentivize and train additional inspectors and certified contractors to meet the needs of this chapter? Again, let's answer this particular question if we have others to add to the end, because I think we just went a few rounds in question 4 about the answer to number 5. So at this point, we don't have a particular answer for number 5, except that DHSS will provide further information. Would we like to answer this by suggesting fee waivers and reciprocity enhancements?
Reciprocity, that's what
Okay.
reciprocity is already in effect, so we can state that.
I mean, enhanced reciprocity would be like if you've passed it in New Jersey, you just
Yeah.
get the certification, and like we established that there is a certain
True reciprocity,
correct.
Yeah,
That
but I
doesn't
think,
that doesn't require
that doesn't require an additional test from us or whatever.
correct because they've already passed that in New Jersey.
4459 regulation states that Delaware does not accept reciprocity from other states.
So what we're going to put here is that
We will make a
DHS.
So now you're,
We want to make a recommendation that.
So what we're going to put here is that DHSS will make recommendations to this committee or report back to this committee on the opportunities around fee waivers
And
for inspectors and risk assessors, as well as I don't know how to
yeah, I want
say
to
that
say.
because I don't. It's not just,
Because without them having,
reciprocity.
without them having to take the test again, if they've already taken the test and got certified in Jersey, then
And if there's regulation in your way, then tell us and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can.
if there's a regulation that prevents that, then we need to address that.
Yeah.
So
And I was-
here's
sorry.
my flag on that question is that how are we going to answer this question when we don't even know what an inspection is? We haven't defined what an inspection is or an inspector.
We're going to answer this question.
So-
Inspector.
We're going to answer these questions and we're going to get to the end. And if you have more questions to add to the list, then let's do
Well,
that.
shouldn't we answer it in a way that is consistent with the
It doesn't matter.
information that?
Because of that, we're going to ask DHSS to give us recommendations for fee waivers and for reciprocity. Is there anything else that we think would streamline someone getting a certification as an inspector or a risk assessor, whatever is determined to be required?
So I hear what you're saying, but I think with this question specifically, what Director Heckles is saying is correct. I hear what you're saying as far as the defining of the assessor versus the inspector. But in this case, if there is not a space if there's a space for reciprocity, we can, my hope would be, we would look at New Jersey, do they have the same standard? Then yes, we'd have automatic reciprocity. If not, then maybe you'd have to test from that particular state. But we can answer this question without already.
Maybe then
knowing.
just add to it,
Number 6 is what is an appropriate standard for lead inspection?
For lead inspectors, right? And
Not for lead inspection, right?
Inspector.
number 6, oh, sorry.
Number 7, how should lead safe be defined and determined? So we're going to get to these questions. We have to go
I
one
guess-
to one.
I guess my hesitation, and
Yeah.
I understand because, you want to get them answered and that makes sense. My hesitation here though, is if we answer number 5 with, the assumption that we're going to use EPA certified lead inspectors and lead risk assessors, which is the way we're answering that question, then it kind of leads into, okay, we're already making exceptions for them with reciprocity and fees. We're mentioning lead inspectors, lead risk assessors, so it's going to make the assumption that, yeah, that's how we're going to move forward with this, which we haven't said we were going to move forward with that. So I just don't want to influence the answers to the other questions with an inaccurate answer to number 5. That makes sense? So, I mean, we can still answer it. We can still, and it can see, how does the state incentivize and train additional inspectors, providing contractors to meet the needs of this chapter? And then it could be, if it's reciprocity, then it's inspectors as defined by the department would receive reciprocity from other states, assuming that they were, your better wording. I just want to make sure we're
answer
not.
number 4, that DHSS is responsible for certifications and has a defined process. We're saying in number 5 that there are at least 2 ways that we think that they could streamline certifications by fee waivers and reciprocity. I think there would be, a third might be how does the state respond to the lack of in-state training? Is that a question that, Del Tech ought to consider, having in order to facilitate implementation of this, having an in-state certificate, offering the EPA course in state? I mean, is that,
We're actually.
you're doing that through
We're
the
doing that
capacity?
now.
So that's another way that we would be incentivizing it. And again, I don't know, we can decide in these other questions what we're what certification standards are going to be necessary. I think, again, the question is very, very specific about how you incentivize and train additional inspectors.
Do we also want to add, as we're listing some of the incentives, any of the barriers in place? Because we just identified full reciprocity would be a barrier. Would we need to update a regulation? For like fee waivers, we would need like a fiscal note to support that endeavor. Do we want to couple those two things within the answer or just list the incentives?
I think that we will probably need much more detail from DHSS about what you may and may not be able to do and be willing to do in this case, right?
Okay.
I think that we could list, for the purposes of submitting this report on March 1, list, the general categories, and then again, by January 1 of 27, come back and say, this is our update, this has been done. I mean, it doesn't have to be, wait until then to be implemented, but that might be a way for us to get there. So, all right, what is your concern
I
with?
think my concern with number 5
Yeah.
would be that we were mentioning lead inspectors and lead risk assessors. So if it's how we're going to train additional inspectors and certified contractors, we can train additional inspectors and certified contractors by allowing reciprocity and waiving some fees.
Okay,
It's a clearer, it gives a clearer answer.
Makes sense. I mean, that's what I think we were trying to say. Yes.
yeah. And in-state training, I think, is the third one. Is that going to help?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that would help streamline and encourage at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is increase the availability of inspectors. I'm using that term more broadly now than, anything else that we think would, should we think about subsidies for the training?
We should
I
think
think
about
that's something that
something.
we're looking into as well.
Okay.
I would
I
always, if we can ask, we can ask.
So scholarship type thing for, to waive the fees for the training as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so my answer to number 5 that I'm gonna fill in after this meeting is over, because this is a PDF, is that DHSS will get back to us with recommendations regarding possible fee waivers, full reciprocity, and in-state training.
Mhm.
And that
Training
is,
subsidy.
and training subsidy, yes. All right,
Number 6, what is an appropriate standard for lead inspection? Now, there is one in the document. It means a surface by surface investigation to determine the presence of lead-based paint and the provision of a written report or electronic equivalent explaining the results of the investigation.
and I believe that definition comes from the administrative code.
Yes.
I know I copied it from Richard's homework from like 3 meetings ago.
So that is what exists. Is everyone satisfied with that definition of an inspection?
That's what it is.
Okay. Hey, that was good. All right, check. 7, how should lead safe be defined and determined? Now, here we have 2 definitions, one for lead free and one for lead safe from the EPA. I will note that at our last meeting, I think the way that I sort of processed the conversation at our last meeting is that this legislation is much more focused on getting rental units lead safe than lead free. Lead-free is sort of a higher level of certification that requires a whole lot more in terms of inspection, in terms of remediation and everything else. If a landlord chooses to go down that path, it exempts them from future inspection responsibilities. But that the work of this committee really ought to be focused on sort of an assumption that landlords are going to have their units certified as lead safe, and only in some circumstances go the lead free route. So that is, and I know that that's different when it gets to your programs and sort of the remediation requirements of your programs. That is, different in my mind than the inspection protocols that are listed in this, and requirements that are listed in the legislation.
So I just want to, we'll get to it later, but I did a homework assignment based on the question you had last time before we left. You wanted to know, like, what are the other surrounding states? What are they doing? Do they have a lead safe, lead free program?
Yes.
So I looked into New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia mostly, and Maryland. And basically it comes down to, I think the question that we have to make a decision on are we looking to do lead safe or lead free inspections? Because depending on what you decide on what you want to do, it's going to determine who's going to do it.
Yes,
Sure.
that's the point.
And again, I think the conversation that we had at the last meeting was that there are two different levels. However, for the most part, in order to pass the bar to legally rent their unit, a landlord must certify that it is lead safe. And that is the inspection that practically landlords are going to seek. They're going to seek a lead safe report and certification, and that will be their green light to lease their unit.
Right.
And only if they choose to sort of exempt themselves from future responsibilities at turnover. For the most part, again, there's that 4-year period in this legislation, but for the most part, this will occur at turnover of the unit, that it will require a lead safe certification prior to lease up. And that is going to be, I would guess, 99.7% of the inspections and the certifications that are promulgated from this process. Maybe not 99.7, but a lot. And that very, very few. And we get bogged down with this lead safe and who's going to inspect to that standard. I think that there is a process for that as well that currently exists. There is a standard, there is a definition. There are people who inspect and can certify to that. And that we should let them continue to do that good work, but that we should focus mostly, if not entirely, on the part that makes sure that units are lead safe, inspected and certified as such prior to lease up.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay.
Yes.
So are we all good with the lead? I mean, I'm not sure.
But the definition.
So the question was lead safe. So we include that definition, but we also include the definition for lead safe. Are we okay using the EPA definitions for both of those?
Yes.
Is that consistent with your work on from other? Do those other states that you looked at defer to EPA definitions?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, they
Pretty sure.
prefer to I could answer for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yes, they refer to the lead safe.
That's the bar that they
EPA
set.
definition, that's the bar that they said.
And so does our
And a lot of
our
times-
bill does too.
Yeah.
A lot of times what happened in, was it 2014, is when the EPA gave authority to states that do their own programs like Delaware.
Yep.
We adopted basically almost everything from the EPA. So when you see definitions coming from the EPA,
Okay.
basically it's mirrored for the state of Delaware as well. So other states are probably doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And just flagging that there's a lot of changing at the federal level. I think I've mentioned this before. We might want to decide where we want to codify our definitions. Should there be a change at the federal level that we don't want?
Instead of just referencing.
Yeah,
Does the department do that? Or do you simply reference EPA?
We do both based on our regulations.
Yes.
So there are, and so in these regulations, we do have a definition section. So it is defined out, even if it does mirror the EPA current.
It's spelled out and sort of a.
But there are other cases where we do reference because there are times that the EPA changes quite frequently, and so it's just easier to reference, but I hear what you're saying.
A good thing and a bad thing, right?
Yes,
Okay.
Where we want it to just be steady.
Probably the best thing to do would be to refer back to your regulations and then have your regulations refer to the EPA. But like everywhere else, refer to your regulation of the definition, then have your definition, follow the EPA until a point where it completely disappears and we no longer have an EPA, and then you still have your definition in place.
Yeah,
That
I'm not
makes
sure, do
sense.
we have a definition of unsafe within our regulations?
No, because we never really had a lead safe, lead free
Program, yeah.
program.
Okay.
Or remediation abatement program, so.
So a recommendation here would be that at this point, the committee agrees with the EPA definition, but encourages the HSS to review its internal state regulations and Caitlin will find better words, clean them up to reflect sort of a reference back to EPA, but also, this.
Kind of codify what we
yeah.
want in the state.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Enough.
Can you translate that?
I'll try. I'm gonna send this all back out to you guys
Excellent.
to do quality control check.
We just don't want you to be bored. Kate.
There's no chance of that happening.
The members of the General Assembly ensure that Caitlin has a lot of job
We'll
security.
fight off the next and all time. We'll just keep you challenged.
I appreciate that.
Anytime.
Looking out for me.
All right, so these next, the second half of this game gets a little complicated. And there's a lot less, we have a lot more blank spaces on our answers. So let's, quite frankly, the question 8 is what is the predicted demand for loans or grants under this chapter? And that is not something that this committee has scratched the surface of. So I'm not even sure that we've had any conversations about it. So I think that blank space, we'll have to say something, but I think that is continued work of the committee.
I might put that as homework on some of our housing guys and talk to their other, they have housing associations to just at least get an estimate from their folks, like if we had to do this, I would need this, or, you know what I mean?
I think we'll have to bring that
Yeah.
back to the committee and kind of use that as like an agenda item that we really dive into, like we have on a lot of these other issues. I think there's, I'm not, my head is not wrapped around it completely. I'm not sure, is this only about sort of access to HUD program funding through the county? The
Well,
state does not have it. I mean, is this about
Yeah.
remediation
Well,
work? Is
as
it
this
about?
is written, it's any funding that the state has, so that
Right.
we allocate in our budget. And say he's like, I have this house, I can't, but I'm doing my best. This is my plan. Then, and we can say, well, we don't have any funding right now. You qualify for it, so you can hold off on that remediation. But we need to know how many, not need to know, but it's helpful to know how many folks are in a space where like, listen, I have 5 houses that would require
That are not lead
remediation,
safe.
right? And I can't foot that bill for the state to know this is how much we should be putting aside.
I think one of the things that we have, when we have talked about this, one of the conversations and sort of stumbling blocks is a lot of these programs are shooting for lead safe or lead free standards. Aren't you looking for lead free for them? I mean, you're looking for lead free,
He's free.
whereas
But
the,
state technically,
How about President, where you guys shoot?
HUD funding requires lead free.
right.
That's HUD.
And
That's
so,
why you have to have a clearance test.
so that
That's
is where
different.
there's two different things.
That's
Like,
different.
right now,
Yeah.
we don't
You're
actually
not getting
have.
rid of the, they don't consider getting rid, lead
That's
free.
let's see.
I know,
Let's
but,
see.
but if it's under, if the lead result, the clearance test is under point, whatever, I forgot the floors, the standards, they consider that lead free. HUD does.
So, but
So.
so that's where this conversation has gone so far, I think, is that essentially the programs, loans and grants that the state, I'll use the state to include, government entities, offer, have that high bar of lead free.
But for clarity, the money that we're setting aside, like in our budget through the General Assembly, that would be different than like, let's say you guys have HUD funding or they have HUD funding. That would be a different,
Yeah,
a
different standard.
different
Correct.
standard. Yeah, that's for what we're talking about with the funding in here.
Understood.
That could pause them from having to go forward.
Funding
You don't
the
have
program
enough-
is
Yes,
what we're asking.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, can I touch on something, with number 8?
Just having the whole heart attack.
So from our experience, like my program is based off of the SB 9, which is Senate Bill 9.
Yep.
It's called a Delaware State Lead-Based Payment Program. And basically, we provide financial aid to anybody that needs it, that needs abatement or remediation work done. From my experience, 99.9% of the landlords and homeowners are gonna ask for financial aid. Because we're tracking this and we're tracking, are they paying it on their own or is the state paying it? And most of it is the state's paying for the remediation work that's needed. And we've had some of the projects as low as $2,000-3,000 and the guy didn't want to pay out of pocket.
Sure.
So we paid for it.
Yep.
That is a condition.
Well, and we did get some reporting, it's in the minutes. I don't know that it necessarily is productive in answering the question that is posed to us, but in the minutes, we did go through and look at some of the cost of your projects. I think we had a lot of conversation about sort of its applicability to the process that a landlord would be going through to become compliant and be able to certify lead safeness of their unit. So I think that your programs in my mind, kind of exist here, and they have a very specific and worthy cause. I'm not sure that the Venn diagram has all that much intersection between the two purposes. So that is certainly more work that this committee needs to do.
Dre has had her hand up.
Hi, is that it's okay for me to go, or did you
Yes.
call my
Please.
name or someone else? Okay, yes.
Her name.
S- just to add for, question 8, like something else to think about when we're predicting the demand for loans or grants under this chapter is that only small business, small property owners can apply for a grant. So that's going to be different. But both small and large can apply for loans, right? So I think that's something to also think about
Okay.
when we're trying to answer
Appreciate
this
it.
question.
Yeah.
I think we could kind of sort of answer it in a roundabout way by just, it's the demand is going to be based off of what the inspection is. Right? So it's going to determine, we don't even know how much it costs to make the house live safe. So if our inspections are visual inspections based off of HUD guidelines, currently Section 8 comes in and does an inspection, a visual inspection. They look around and they make sure there's no excessive dust or chip paint. So if that is going to be, if that's the standard, and then an RRP contractor can come in under EPA guidelines and do the work, it's going to be a manageable cost. And probably most landlords aren't going to go through all the hoops to get several $1,000s worth of grant money. So it would be way more cost effective to administer. But then if it goes through like Branchon's program, and I think Branchon, you might have a handle on the amount of grants that the money that you would need, or the demand that from your perspective that you're seeing if someone wants to make it to the next level and do lead free. Right now, that might be something that we can actually get a handle on and know how much demand there is out there. So I think we could actually answer part of the question.
Sure, and I think that again, there is some documentation in our minutes and our conversation, but if the question is the predicted demand for loans and grant, and we, again, to your earlier point, we don't know how many units there are in each of those units, how much remediation, how many of them will pass inspection, how many of them will need remediation, and how much that remediation will cost. Like there unknowns the whole way through that formula that gets you to a predicted demand.
Well, lead free versus lead safe versus lead free.
Correct.
So, yeah, and lead safe, I think, is a lot harder to predict than lead free.
Yes.
We, Franchon, you guys already have people
Yeah.
participating in the program, so maybe we could take some of their numbers and, that way we can at least address the question.
Gotcha. I mean, so are you suggesting that we address it that way in this initial report for March? Or, I mean, I'm looking at this as
I'm
probably,
trying to get some answers, but the question. It may
yeah,
sound like-
well, I think we're gonna have many that we are gonna continue to work on.
Right.
Yeah, I think for that one, I mean, it's helpful to have a ballpark just because we already have some money planned for this budget. But if we wait until January of next year, we might not be in the next DRB at the level that we need, considering, what our estimate is. We can always update that. But for those that don't understand, the GRB is the governor's recommended budget isn't set in stone. Then the legislature goes in and, moves some stuff around, but it is helpful to be in the governor's recommended budget. And so if we have some type of estimate going into next year, it would be helpful.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yes. Yes, I was back. If it didn't seem like I was on your team on that one, I'm sorry. 'Cause I was.
So point of clarity, am I just keeping that blank before our next meeting? Is there anything we're filling in between now and our February 25th meeting on number 8?
I mean, it sounds like,
It's like, I kind of agree that I don't know that we can know until we know which will be a later on question, what would our standard be?
I mean, the answer to the question could simply be that it's going to be based off of current,
Yeah.
Correct. it's going to be, sorry. Based off of the inspection standard, and then also on maybe current demands with, the two programs that are already seeking lead-free designations.
And then once we know the inspection standard, then maybe you could go back to some of the housing associations, et cetera, and say, hey,
Yeah, absolutely.
can we get a survey of folks to say who would be using this?
Right.
Have a stronger number on it.
Okay.
Definitely.
So I think I captured that. So what I will input between now and the next meeting is the answer will depend on the inspection standard, in parentheses, lead-free versus lead-safe, plus the current demand of the existing programs with DHSS and Newcastle County.
well, so, because we've determined that the inspection standard is lead safe.
Because I don't have numbers for that.
Well, we can do based off the legislation, correct me if I'm wrong, you can do lead safe or lead free,
In order to rent your unit, you must pass a certification that it is lead safe.
minimum.
And then if you're lead free, you don't have to re-inspect. Yeah.
And so, again, what I said earlier was, to me, the lead-free is a completely different thing that I feel a whole lot less concerned about, because if a landlord chooses to go down that road, good luck. I wish you well, and you will be exempted from further inspections. But for the purposes of making sure that this is implementable, I think that is a higher standard that a landlord may choose to go down, that may cost them a lot of money, may not. I mean, you talked about last time, I don't know if it was during the meeting or afterwards, you were describing a complete gut job that still tested positive for lead because of a church flaking its paint onto that property. And so I'm like, there's so much. And I think that when we get into that world of the absolute of lead free, there just has to be sort of a separate pathway. And I think that these programs, because they are mostly linked to health and sort of reported elevated blood levels and things like that, you're not trying to make the entire housing stock lead free. But we are, through this legislation, trying to make the entire housing stock lead safe. And so I think there's a big difference there. And I think it's important for us to say, listen, we've got a lead safe standard that is required prior to lease up, and that's what we're focused on. So, grants and loans to make units lead safe, I think is complicated, because I don't think that they are the $50,000 for a Victorian home in Sussex County, right? I mean, that's not the type of, it may be a few $100. We talked about high friction areas and things but they may require some investment by a landlord to get to lead safe. So, to your point, I mean, is it worth it for them to go and apply for a grant for a few $100? Probably not. But you know, how does that, so I think it becomes complicated to get to a demand level. But I think that we want to make sure that when we do that, that we think about the lead safe component of this in everything that we're talking about. Okay. If not the department, and I presume that that is the Department of Health and Social Services,
Yes.
what state or local agency, department, or program is better suited to implement and enforce this chapter? And I think everyone did the nose goes thing. That worked, and that stands up in court, I think.
Apparently.
Yeah. I think if you can remind me, Caitlin, why we've had DOJ consumer protection in local jurisdictions for enforcement of different parts of the chapter, I believe, but we weren't suggesting that that the department is not responsible for. There was a collection of the certifications role that the department DHSS was designated for in the legislation. I think we were talking about consumer protection in terms of non-compliance. Is that?
I think so. And then like local code enforcement about their units. being
Which would handle
safe.
somebody being off the grid in terms of rental or anything else. So that would be handled at the local level. If you're operating in a jurisdiction, operating a rental in a jurisdiction that requires certification or registration of it, it's at the local level. So things like that would occur there. But anyone have anything to add to that at this point?
No, I just agree with you. I think DHSS, BPH specifically, we're still handling the certifications. We have the foundation in place and we're enhancing that currently. So that would be our role. I'm just unfamiliar with the loan and grant process, and I'm not sure who would be the proper agency to administer loan and grant.
Would that be you guys?
No, we did the nose thing. You know, okay, so we could talk about that.
I think that's something.
And if you don't, I just wanted to be, sorry, when you said certifications, did you mean of the employer, of the
Inspection?
The
workforce, or
yeah,
of the?
the workforce.
Oh,
But there's also a requirement, oh boy, here we go, trying to get through this bill.
We're talking about
the certifications for that.
Let's say
Right.
that three, I thought was given by the testing environmental.
Fill my coffee real quick.
That's a really good idea. Here it is. I found it pretty quickly. 5402, if you're following along at home. At least that is at least one reference where it says the certificate must be obtained and filed with the department. So when a landlord has their unit inspected and they get a certificate that says, yes, indeed, this unit is lead safe, you may rent it. They have to file that certificate with the department. That's it.
Okay. Now, would it make sense that they're filing that certificate with the same agency that's housing the registry? So that it could be linked within a data system?
We don't have a registry.
Oh, we're not going to that, okay.
Well, I'm saying we don't have one.
Okay.
We don't have one, and so if there was a registry, I suppose that it would be very easy to then check that is, yes, that it would be done in that same place.
I kind of thought,
But we don't have registries across the state right now, and so I just before we move on, I mean, I just wanted to be clear to implement and enforce this chapter. So that implies that we're looking at several different parts of implementation of this chapter, and that when you said certificate, it is both about workforce and the passage as lead safe of individual units.
But now that's gonna
Specific in our
be
notes.
based on like what database is gonna be used, how is it gonna be paid for, and who's gonna pay for the resources to manage that database?
And if it turns into a registry, is that something you guys would want to have as like a start of a housing registry?
Because we're Department of Health, we don't do any, we only do the EPA certification, like certifications within the state from the workers, but if the landlord needs to get a lead safe, lead free certification, it's kind of out of our realm.
Indeed. As he said with his Venn diagram, it would be a new program. Right? Yeah.
A costly one.
But you said department, so I don't
It would
know.
be yeah, it'd be a new program under our department, I think is how the statute's currently,
That's how it currently reads.
yes.
So I kind of had a thought on
And it's
that.
going to registry. Yeah, makes sense.
Because, you know, the registry, again, sounds like a good idea, but implementing it is going to be troublesome and expensive. And we kind of already have programs that take care of a lot of this stuff, right? So the registration for contractors, whether inspectors or assessors, you guys are register those contractors with the state, right? We have landlord tenant code that already provides enforcement for a whole lot of things that you have to do as a landlord, right? So you have to provide a safe house, you have to provide all sorts of stuff, you know. You have to provide a range, right? So I don't have to give a certificate to show that I put a range in the house. If I didn't put a range in the house, the remedy for the landlord tenant code is that the tenant can go and get free legal counsel, because we currently have free legal counsel. They get free legal counsel and then they go through the courts and they enforce that remedy. And then there's consequences to the landlord if they don't comply. And I feel like this is the same type of thing, right? There's a requirement, you have to be lead safe or lead free. It's becomes part of landlord tenant code. If you don't do it, then there's remedies in the code to enforce things that landlords aren't doing already. So we already kind of have a system in place. It sounds like this is something that everybody, that both the other departments want to take on, because people are already overburdened. And we're going to add to a budget. We're going to add a budget line that we don't necessarily need for a system, for something that we already have a system in place to handle. So maybe this is just something that becomes part of the landlord tenant code and is enforceable through there.
So I think I hear that. I don't think it's an answer number 9. There's a theme today. I would
It's really a good
suggest.
number.
9B.
So what I wrote down over here is, should certificates be filed with the department? I think could be another question that we add, right? And I think you made a strong case for why it may or may not be necessary. I don't know that I want to sort of dive into that as we're trying to get through these. So let me note that and ask if to be determined is probably the best way for this committee, given where we are, to answer the assignment of or sort of validation of all of the implementation of enforcement of the chapter. But I think that is why, maybe with a little bit of narrative, because that is why we included the Department of Justice and Consumer Protection. There is a role that they have there when it comes to enforcement of landlord tenant code. We could cite landlord tenant code and remedies within the landlord tenant code. And local jurisdictions, as well as sort of enforcement arms and implementation. But for the most part, say that this is still work of the committee over the next period. Does that work? And I think we should. That's a good point about to your request about about the bill itself. Should it be is there value in that certification being filed with the department? What is the potential impact this chapter will have on small property owners, mid-sized property owners, and large property owners? We don't have an answer to that one. Would anyone like to suggest that we missed something, or is that
I think TBD is good.
is this a good TBD?
I think that this, I don't think, I know, because I did this. So the genesis of this question
Yes.
is, again, a lot of conversations that would only be had with me.
Yep.
And not others. And so this is a space, not to put everything on you as the property guy, but to get property folks to come out, either a public comment or through you, to share what their concerns were with the legislation.
why they asked for there to be a feasibility study, right? And, so to make sure that we're hitting all those pieces and kind of help us generate those additional questions and a half that Director Heckles loves, right? Like, are we missing something that, should be shared more publicly than just in my office or on Zoom?
I mean, I'd be happy to reach
Yeah.
out and maybe to add to that and get like a list of concerns
Yeah.
and questions.
That'd probably be great. Just give it to Caitlin.
I love that.
Can we,
Just the hard thing to answer this question is not really sure what the
Right.
final bill is gonna be, so what's the actual?
Well,
impact?
I mean, kind of you are, because whatever,
and we're,
unless there are.
we're using the bill as our.
Yeah, so unless there are specific recommendations that come from this feasibility study, this bill kicks in, right? And so
Well, then
this
it's
is where
catastrophic.
I will just not to call him out, but Jeff Sheridan, I'm sure has 562 different suggestions, so he's a good starting point. And so to have those in there would be helpful. So
In summary, the impact is that, I mean, some units that are not able to pass lead safe inspection would not legally be rented. That's kind of it.
Well, yeah,
You're
so
talking about the impact as being a financial.
this is specifically on owners, so for, I don't know that, I think they're the only extra properties. But from the property owner's perspective, what are your concerns here? Like, if this goes through as written, without any of us putting in any changes, what do you see as like, these are
So
red
that's not
flags?
how I read
or
the
no?
question, but yes,
Yeah.
I could, and now that you clarified, it, then yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to come up with
Absolutely.
A summary.
And it's not just red flags, it could be good things. You could say, it makes us more competitive, whatever it is, but yeah. What?
Could be good. Never know. That was worth a shot.
Yes, and I've seen in the bill that it only addressed small property owners and large property owners. There's like no clear definition for what a mid-size property
Yeah.
owner would be considered.
That, I think that would be for the owners to say like, hey, this is what we're thinking. You're forgetting this missing middle. I don't know.
Well, the bill sort of works differently, because I think it gives a little bit of grace to large property owners, if I recall, by requiring only certain number of the units.
That's in an apartment, if it's an apartment.
Right, so that's the large, I think, here. So mid-size would probably be,
Well, large
Well,
is a
large could be
portfolio, so you could
portfolio,
have,
yeah.
you could be a large property owner and have 100 single-family homes, or you could have one apartment complex with 100 units. So in this, it's, if you have an apartment building and it has 10 units, you can test, I forget how many, you can test a couple of them, and if they are lead safe, then the whole building is good.
so to that point then, should we ask for the impact based on the two types that are defined in the legislation? Sort of the individual units and then the larger multifamily units. Because I mean, if you have 100 units and they're all individual units, the impact is just the impact of one unit times 100, right? I mean, or if you own 50, it's 50, or so it doesn't really change, but it does change if you have that multifamily component to it, right? Where you're sampling, that's a little bit of potentially a different impact. Not sure if it's tremendous, but it's a potentially different impact. Would that make sense, or do you
I
think
can
that?
definitely see where you're coming from. This was a while ago that this was written, so give me some grace. But I do feel like it's from conversations that came up where folks, property owners specifically, were like, hey, there's kind of like, in
Okay.
in the governing world, you gotta set a line, right? For clarity. But folks were saying like, there's a difference between some people that have, right now, we have like 19 lower, fewer are small property owner. Anything above that is large. Well, some folks consider themselves mid-level, mid-sized property owners.
Yep.
So from their perspective, should there be a third category, right? Again, I can't remember what all the things were, but
It gives them more flexibility. Okay.
then they don't come forward with it. But my point was like, bring into the public what you share with me.
All right, so we're gonna
And
have
some of
Yeah.
the glaring concerns are the fines and
Yeah.
stuff associated with non-compliance. And the way the bill's written now, it's almost impossible to comply with. So according to the fines that are set forth for the large property owners, which is 20 and above, I mean, you put somebody out of business in
Okay.
a couple months. So I mean, that's a glaring
Yeah.
problem.
So I'm trying not to like give anything.
let's not pin it in.
Yeah.
Let's, you guys have the
Yeah.
ability to answer anything. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm
is
looking
really
for you to
a-
plead your case. No.
So, I mean, to the extent the rest of the
Yeah.
committee, we'll take that and we'll insert it unless, there is some glaring, issue, we could probably note it though. Is it what is your thought on, a committee not necessarily agreeing with, their assessment of impact?
I
Is
think
is this like a dissenting, not necessarily dissenting, but like do we need the committee to have some sort of record of validation of those?
No, I think that, again, I'm not the only one that will read this report, so I think if there isn't going to be a vote on it, just to, right, like this is from the perspective of property owners without any input from
I
them.
think that's okay in terms of answering, you wrote it, good
Yeah.
question. No, I think that's helpful because, I think that'll express, it'll give that perspective, which is what
Yeah.
we're looking for. But if you say something that the rest of the committee doesn't think is entirely accurate or exaggerates,
So
we can just kind of, we can just say, well, this is. But if that's what you're
Yeah.
looking for, right,
Absolutely.
then.
It'd probably be helpful to, if you get input from others, to just flag who you got the input from as well.
Sure.
Not
We
necessarily
need
give
names.
individual
We're gonna
names.
name the
but
specifics.
you can say like, the Realtors Association, Wilson Property Owners, right? So like,
Real
yeah.
quick, it's 11:55.
Perfect.
I don't know if other folks have hard stops. I do not, but I just wanted to flag that. So, Mr. Chair, are we going to continue going through the list or?
Mhm. It feels like we always get through about 8, 9 questions. So just feedback for the legislator, like that's as many questions as a committee can. That's it. I don't know, like we can try starting at 11 next time, but we'll still only get through number 8 somehow.
Yeah.
I don't understand,
Yeah.
but, because again, I think that these are somewhat, less filled in because of that fact. So,
Do we
Right.
just go from that point forward? From that point?
let us try to, because I think some of this is again, much more similar to like number 9, where there's a TBD, like what forms must be created. We're not quite there yet. And so that is going to be continued work of the department and implementers and, this committee. So let us take a crack at filling in some of some of these questions with, to be determined. Again, my goal is to make sure that this committee, meets its obligation by March 1st, which is to submit a report, acknowledging that it will be, incomplete, that it will have a lot of TBDs, that our work continues, and that we are responsible for, further, reports as we go. We did not get to a very robust conversation about, questions 17 and beyond. So that is another problem. Perhaps we won't make that March 1st, and we need a little bit more just to even get to where I was hoping we would get to on March 1st. So let's see where we can get to by the next meeting and in terms of answering these questions. Again, I don't see that as anything more than sort of here's where we are, progress report, and the work continues. So hopefully that clarifies a little bit about what I'm trying to accomplish by getting that report in at all. And then we keep plugging away at it. Okay. Yes.
If I could say, my request would be, if there are things that folks on this committee think we should address now that might need to be run during this session,
Yes.
that we prioritize those as the questions
Okay.
that we answer. Even if it's not part of the 16, I mean, I can always put, if we don't want to do an extension, I can always put a new resolution that says we are holding off on certain pieces of these questions. But I don't want to have this session closed out with, and then be like, man, we should have, defined something or whatever,
Yeah.
just to.
Understood.
Think of.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Let's see what we can get before the next meeting, in terms of a fileable progress report, that satisfies that March 1st deadline, and then continue to work from there. Public comment?
Oh,
Is that where we want to go?
yes.
All right, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can do better this time.
All right, I almost want to do online first. I normally do in person. I'm just worried
Okay,
about the tech. Typically, we give members of the public 2 minutes to speak. I will screen share a timer so that you can see how much time you have. As always, we do accept written comments. They can be emailed to me. We also have on our website at all times a little Survey Monkey so you can fill out comments in between meetings. I am gonna invite online attendees first. So if you would like to give public comment, please raise your hand. I see Matt is up first.
wait a second, hold on. Amy says our meeting cut out again. How is that?
It's probably the time.
Deidre, can
Oh,
you,
yeah.
Yeah, but they're on it.
you can hear us?
It's 12 p.m. maybe today.
Yeah.
Matt, I'm gonna unmute Matt to see if he can hear us.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Well,
And others can as well.
This is Crystal. I can hear you.
okay. Whew.
Should we join?
Could she just call into a
Speaker.
phone and talk over a phone?
Two-minute time.
Is she on? Did she drop out of the meeting?
She dropped out of the meeting. I don't know.
There is a question though, whether there's a time limit for some of these, and we're over the 2 hours, it looks.
But that doesn't, it looks like it's still recording and it looks
It
like
is.
others can hear us. So I think we ought to proceed.
Okay, yeah.
You can sense the confidence in my voice.
Ooh. All right, so hang on. Reset. Stop.
She can log in.
Let's go to rejoin.
Or she could call somebody's cell phone and just talk over this. Is acceptable.
Okay, let's get Matt.
All right, so Matt, you are invited to speak and your time starts now.
Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I created and I manage the lead paint program at Brightfields. I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I'm also the at-large governor appointee to the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Advisory Committee. Brightfields is already getting calls from landlords and property managers who either think that this law is in effect or they're trying to get ahead of the game and have their properties assessed. So with that in mind, we know the definition of lead safe and lead free, which was discussed today. But as lead professionals, we need to know what must occur for a unit to qualify as either. I request that as soon as possible that the committee define what must occur in order for a dwelling to be determined to be lead free or lead safe. Lead safe, as we know, the definition means that the paint is intact, not creating dust, chips, or exposure hazards. But we need to be very specific in what must the inspector or risk assessor do in order to certify that the dwelling is lead safe. For something to be lead free, it would make sense to do a lead paint inspection, which has been defined. If you're going to require dust samples, what standards are you going to use? There's a new dust standard for clearance. It just went into effect ju this month, or excuse me, January of this year. And there's also a new risk standard that is being used that also went into effect January this year. So we need to know what is going to be required in order to meet both of these standards, and also what will the reinspection process be required for dwellings that are lead free. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I do just, for the sake of transparency, want to share with everyone that Mr. Jones had sent public comment for the December meeting. I missed that in my inbox. I apologize. He resent those comments to me and they will be attached to today's meeting minutes. So my apologies. All right. We're still taking public comment from online attendees. Donald, did you want to make a comment? Oh, sorry, I gotta unmute him. That would help, right? Okay, Mr. Farrell, I have allowed your mic access. So if you would like to give comment, you may do so.
Wait till it starts. Just reset.
Oh my goodness. Donald, can you? Is he still on? Donald, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay. Okay, how was that?
All right.
That's better. We can hear you now.
John Paul, and I'm a landlord and tenant rights advocate. And I'd like to say that as a landlord and a lead poison prevention advocate, among my landlord peers, I'm an outlier. And however, I've had an opportunity to hear their issues and concerns with this piece of legislation. While this process is being finalized, I believe that something has to be put in place to allow landlords, especially the small mom and pop providers, an opportunity to be proactive. Why can't a provider, or what's preventing a provider from buying a Luxfor MagTech lead chick 8-pack test kit for $37 and do their own assessment? I think it's an excellent point to have a lead safe technician status to be able to streamline this whole process while the fine points of SB9 are being worked out. Why does a person have to have a certification to be able to apply lead block paint? I think that this committee should try to reduce the hurdles among providers and allow them to do as much of the work to make a property lead safe within reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Okay. If anybody else who is attending online would like to give public comment, please either raise your hand or put a note in the chat. I'll give it maybe 30 seconds. Okay, I'm not seeing any other virtual attendees with their hands raised for public comment. So now I'm going to give folks in the room an opportunity. So I will now invite Mary. Hey, you can sit, I mean, do you want to be on camera? They should be able to hear you. So let me, restart the timer for you.
To read.
Or just gotta get my mouse to work. Yep. All right, sorry, guys. Here we go. So good afternoon. My name is Mary Caroselli. For context, I'm a lifelong Delaware resident, mom to a preschooler, and a licensed family therapist. I serve as board chair for the Parent Information Center, which provides support to parents of children with disabilities. I'm also preparing to be the landlord myself as my family transitions to multi-generational housing. When I choose to profit from a rental property, I am accepting responsibility for keeping it safe for everyone, especially children. That's not an unfair burden, it is a basic landlord responsibility. We know lead damages developing brains, specifically the parts responsible for impulse control, emotion regulation, attention, and learning. Even low-level exposure significantly increases risk of ADHD, learning disabilities, and behavior problems. These neurological changes are permanent. And I often hear complaints about kids these days, youth behavior and crime, while allowing a well-known root cause to remain in children's homes. For years, we've been reacting to these consequences through special education, behavioral health services, school discipline, and law enforcement. Things that are much more costly and much less feasible than lead remediation. Practicing in Delaware, I've seen many families struggle with issues that are clearly environmental factors, and everyone points the fingers at parents, school, and community when really the finger's here. We are ignoring where the real burden falls. Inspection and remediation costs are temporary one time. Lead exposure costs are permanent and lifelong. We must take necessary steps now, preventing exposure before harm. The question isn't whether it has a cost, it absolutely does. The question is who is going to bear it? Landlords profiting from housing or children whose brains are still developing. I urge you to use the lead safe rental housing plan prepared by the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Advisory Committee and examples from other states to take action now to prevent harm that we already know how to stop. Take care of our children with the same urgency that we take care of corporations and the same resources we use for our beaches. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that report was entered into our record at some point.
Yes.
Yes. Is that the right one? This
Yeah,
one, make sure.
but there's a lot of information in there that you could be using right now that.
Understood.
That lead safe rental plan was attached to a public comment from Dr. Rowe. So if you look at the meeting minutes, it's in a very long PDF, but it is there. All right. There's nobody else in the room that is signed up for public comment. Just verifying nobody else wants to go. Another last call for folks online. Okay. All right, I believe that concludes public comment.
I've continued to get text from Amy that she is unable to rejoin. But since the rest of the members of the public were able to make their comments and I believe can still hear us, I think at least in this case, all of this is being captured and it may be a connection on her end, which I think is one of the questions that this remote hybrid meeting guidance that we're looking for from DOJ, I think is hopefully going to help us work with, how do we make that determination and how do we proceed with these public meetings. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn?
I just want to remind folks that our next meeting, which is scheduled for February 25th, will be hosted at Buena Vista in Newcastle. So not in this room, not in this building, Buena Vista in Newcastle. That will be the anchor location. It will be hybrid as always, so folks can join online if they don't want to go to Buena Vista.
And that is on February
25th. Probably. I don't have it right in front of me.
Yes.
That channel seen back on.
That's right.
All right, anything else? Seeing no hands raised, I consider us adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and all your work today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.